Cup qualifying is here. And we already did Africa in the last video, so if you if you want to know what happened in Africa World Cup qualifying, it was so cool that we decided to make it its own video. But now we're talking about Asia, where a team did clinch World Cup qualification. That team was not Saudi Arabia, but they did get a very, very nice result here. A 0-0 draw at Japan. This is only the second time Japan's dropped points, and Japan is one of the now 4 teams that are outside of the host nations that have officially qualified for the World Cup. They did that after the opening match day. But this is a huge point for Saudi Arabia because, one, they don't have to play Japan again, while other countries still do, and Japan is, generally speaking, a buzzsaw, and Saudi Arabia is playing for its life. This point actually sets up a massive opportunity for Saudi Arabia. It does, because Japan showed up and won. They beat China 2-0. So congratulations. Australia showed up and won. They beat China 2-0. They went on the road. 2 goals. Jackson Irvine kicked it off in the 16th minute. He's just the quintessential Aussie player in my mind right now. Right, but they took control of this early. Okay, so China ended up dropping both matches that it had to play in this window to Saudi Arabia and Australia. 2 big opportunities by the wayside. But that win for Australia, the back-to-back wins, the real announcement of intent, 5-1 over Indonesia, 2-0 against China, puts Australia at 13 points. But Saudi Arabia being able to squeak a win against China and then just stifle a Japanese team that's already guaranteed to go to the World Cup, that sets up the match. It sets up the match because Australia still has to play Japan. Okay, they still have to play Japan. And remember, the top 2 spots get an automatic World Cup berth. 3rd or 4th, you're going through the playoff system. It's a lot better than the African one. Okay, there are going to be 6 teams from the 3 groups that finish 3rd or 4th. So you're going to take 6 teams. 2 of those will get automatic spots. Asia has 8 spots. Only 6 of them, because there's 3 groups, 3, only 6 of them will get these automatic spots. The last 2 will come from a playoff system with these 3rd and 4th place teams from all 3 groups. So 33% of those teams will make it. If you finish, then 2 more of those teams will get an opportunity to have an Asian playoff, and then one of those, the winner of that Asian playoff will go to the Intercontinental playoff. So if you finish 3rd or 4th, you have a 50% chance to at least be going to the Intercontinental playoff to go to the World Cup, right? This, unlike finishing 2nd in the African groups, this is not a death sentence to be in this particular spot. So it's not the worst thing in the world for Australia or Saudi Arabia. One of them is going to end up there. But Australia is playing Japan. They're at home. Okay, so they're going to be down under for this match. Maybe that's going to give them the boost that they need to go on and get a point, which is going to make things a little more comfortable. But Australia is playing Bahrain. Now, Bahrain, very important match for them. They're at home. Okay, and if they can find a way to get a win, that will keep their World Cup dreams alive. Right, so it's not like Bahrain's not going to be giving everything, and it's not like this is going to be the easiest match in the world. But if Saudi Arabia wins this match and Australia loses to Japan, which I would say is the most likely outcome of those 2 matches, we now have a match between Australia and Saudi Arabia. They're tied on points. The winner goes to the World Cup. The loser goes to the playoffs. That would be epic. That would be awesome. And the best part about Asian World Cup qualifying is, unlike when we're looking at Africa, this shit's going to happen in the summer. Africa doesn't get back into qualifying until September. This is happening in June. All right, there is an Australia, Japan, Saudi Arabia, Australia. Like, this is happening in June. So we are not all that far away from being able to see who is going to be grabbing these final World Cup spots out of these groups. We're going to have 6 teams qualified from Asia by June. Okay, a year before the World Cup, we will have 6 of the 8 Asian teams locked in as World Cup qualifiers. The final 2 matches are hitting. And the match is in Saudi Arabia. And we know Saudi Arabia will bring a crowd for that. It is going to be a tough match for Australia if you're going in there tied on points. Now, Australia's goal difference is way better, particularly because they padded it with a +6 in the 2 matches that they played in this window. That gives Australia the opportunity to get a draw and get out. But unless Australia beats Japan, right, they're not in a position where they can lose this match in Saudi Arabia and go to the World Cup, which is awesome. I mean, the fact that that's going to be the situation we find ourselves in is fantastic. Now, the other match was also important. Indonesia against Bahrain. This is for, again, 50% of the teams that finish third and fourth are going to at least go to the Intercontinental Playoff. Okay, half of them, right? And a third of them are going to go straight to the World Cup. Indonesia is trying to get into that conversation, and they did. A huge bounce back result from Indonesia. Australia flattened them in the first match 5-1. Indonesia at home wins 1-0 against Bahrain and has set itself up to be the team in this fourth position. Officially set itself up to be the team in this fourth position. The issue is Indonesia has Japan in the last match. They've got Japan on the road in the last match, which means they probably need to win this 6-pointer against China. China and Bahrain, going into the 9th match out of 10, are playing for their footballing lives here. They really are. I mean, if Bahrain loses and China loses, that means that they're both out. If China wins against Indonesia, the dream is still alive. Their goal difference is so bad that they're going to need a little bit more help, but they're probably going to get it because Indonesia is playing Japan. Right? The opportunity is still there for China and Bahrain to sneak into that top 4. It is, even though they both had terrible windows where they lost both matches that they played. But this win for Indonesia against Bahrain separated these two teams and puts Indonesia in the driver's seat where if they win against China, it's looking like they're going to be able to go to that playoff. Can they get out of it? Who the hell knows? But at that point, they're friggin' just be happy to be there. Technically, it is still possible for Indonesia to grab the automatic spot, but let's be for real. Let's not get carried away here. The next group is a particularly interesting one now in a way that it wasn't before. Because Jordan, a team that made the final of the Asian Cup, has backed up that miraculous upset performance by being really good in World Cup qualifying. They drew 1-1 against South Korea. This in South Korea as well. A massive result for Jordan that has them sitting pretty in the automatic qualifying spot. But the other reason that they are there is Iraq bottled massively. South Korea is trying to bottle. South Korea is making it really interesting for themselves with 3 consecutive draws. But they do have a home match against Kuwait in their last match. So you're thinking that they're probably going to be okay as long as they can get to that last match not in trouble. The problem is they could have been in trouble going into that last match if it wasn't for Palestine. Palestine kept its World Cup dream alive. It is faint, but they kept their World Cup dream alive with a ridiculous comeback against Iraq. At home against Iraq, they scored an 88th minute set piece, 97th minute set piece to come back from down 1-0 at home to up 2-1. The Iraqi players collapsed all over the field because when you really look at what this meant for the Iraqi national team in terms of their position, if they win this match, they're on 15 points. They're in second. They play South Korea next at home. And Iraq's home advantage is big. That stadium is loud. And it is not a short road trip for South Korea either. That is a difficult match for South Korea to play at Iraq. If Iraq was able to win that, they would have guaranteed their qualification to the World Cup right there. And all they had to do was hold on to the win at Palestine, a team that hadn't won a match this entire qualifying cycle. Granted, Palestine has a couple of draws. One of them is South Korea. They're a competitive team that made the last 16 at the Asian Cup. Qualifying just hasn't gone their way. But with this win, this miraculous last-second comeback, Palestine's still alive. And their next match is against Kuwait, which is the most winnable match that they have in the entire group stage, right? Because Kuwait's the other team that is not in the top 4 right now. So if Palestine's able to win that, they are on 9 points, and they are potentially chasing the coattails of Oman. Oman's next match is Jordan. Jordan's obviously playing for its life, and so is Oman, because Jordan and Iraq look like, and they've been setting this up for a while, the two teams that are going to battle for that second spot. What's really interesting, of course, is if Oman finds a way to win this game, and they are the home team, if they find a way to win this game, they're tied on points with Jordan. Iraq loses to South Korea, and all of a sudden we've got Jordan and Oman on 13, Iraq on 12, Palestine on 9, and everything is on the table going into the final day, which would be unbelievably interesting. But the real lucky team is South Korea, because Jordan coming up in that match against Oman, they could have won and gone to 16. Iraq would have shown up, and they would have been on 15 points. If they beat South Korea would have bumped down to third. They are not guaranteed to be in the World Cup yet. They still aren't. But if Iraq had won that game against Palestine, South Korea would be sweating. they would be sweating because they're trying. They're desperately trying. 3 straight draws against Palestine, Jordan, and Oman. They're trying to throw it away. There's a little Spurs magic in there. Oman did get the 1-0 win over Kuwait, which is why Kuwait has kind of fallen down. If Kuwait was able to win that match, things would have been completely different. But right now, Kuwait's sitting on a pile of draws. They've only lost 3 of the 8 matches they've played, but they've drawn 5 of them. Just a really tough World Cup qualifying cycle for Kuwait. If they can beat Palestine, they are still alive, but they're going to need they're going to need 2 wins in their last 2 matches to keep the World Cup dream alive at this point, which is obviously tough for them. Then there's the third group where we almost had something beautiful happen. Almost. Uzbekistan took the lead 2 separate times in Iran, but they were not able to hold on to it. Mehdi Taremi scored a pair of goals, including an 83rd minute equalizer after a free kick from Faisalayev, the 21-year-old starlet on Uzbekistan. And Iran managed to qualify for the World Cup with this draw. So this was a very important result for Iran, but if Uzbekistan had managed to win this, it was possible that they were going to qualify for the World Cup right now. Not in June, but right now. Instead, they are going to have to sweat this out going into the last couple of matches, while Iran, 7 points clear with 2 matches to go, has guaranteed a World Cup spot. So Japan and Iran, 2 of the most consistent qualifiers out of Asia, have delivered again, and they are both headed to the World Cup. So congratulations to them. Being able to pull this draw back at home is what mathematically did it for them. The reason Uzbekistan, even though they got what is generally considered a good result in a draw at Iran, is still in trouble is because the United Arab Emirates. The UAE has had a very good qualifying. They were not super far off the World Cup 4 years ago. They did make it into this kind of final group stage round and put some pressure on a playoff spot that they weren't quite able to grab. But this time on the road against South Korea, which it's not in South Korea. They were playing in Riyadh. They were 1-1 at the half and then scored in the 98th minute. 98th minute to get to 13 points. Now remember, being 3rd or 4th, your World Cup dream is still alive, right? And with this win, the UAE has guaranteed that it will finish in the top 4, right? That is guaranteed. That is possible for them. That it is impossible. Let's say, sorry, the better way to word it, it's impossible for them to not finish in the top 4. UAE will be going at least to the playoff. That is something that they have accomplished. That is something that they have guaranteed. How many different ways can I say it? Can anybody think of any other ones? That'd be good. But with that win, the UAE sets up a match against Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan on the road against UAE. Uzbekistan has a 4-point lead, which means if the Uzbeks win or draw that match, they're going to the World Cup. If they lose it, Uzbekistan is playing Qatar last, and Qatar is playing for its life. They just lost 3-1 at Kyrgyzstan. This a stunning result, the first win for Kyrgyzstan that they've had in this in this competition, and it was a red card for Qatar here that sank it when it was 1-1. It was 1-1. They got a red card. Sorry, second win. I forgot. Kyrgyzstan actually beat North Korea earlier, and then they have 0 draws. But the Kyrgyz Republic is now on 6 points. Qatar is now on 10. Qatar's next match is against Iran. So if you are Kyrgyz and you want something to believe in, look who you play next. North Korea, the only other team you've beaten. Of course, it's on the road, but it's not really on the road. So that's a winnable match, which means the most likely outcome of these 2 matches, Kyrgyzstan beating North Korea and Qatar losing to Iran, puts us at Qatar on 10 and Kyrgyzstan on 9. That sends us to the final day of qualifying, with Kyrgyzstan having a snowball's chance in hell of pulling something off. And that final match for them is at home against the UAE. Obviously, UAE is very involved in trying to get an automatic qualifying spot at this point, but Kyrgyzstan at home in the final match of qualifying in this group, still with a chance to make it into that playoff round, that would be wild. That would be awesome. Now, for Qatar's part, unbelievably disappointing qualifying from them. Their final match, if they are unable to beat Iran, would be at Uzbekistan, which is even harder than the match against UAE. So Qatar really has ordered up the 2 best teams in this group as its last 2 matches, which is exactly what you don't want to hear when the group looks like this. Qatar is the back-to-back Asian champion. Back-to-back. They're like the Italy of Asia, right? They can win the continental competition all day, twice on Sunday. Okay, but they can't make the World Cup to save their lives. The only one they've ever been to is their own. Right, but South Korea hasn't won the Asian Cup since 1960. Iran hasn't won it in a long time. Japan wins a lot of them. Australia won it fairly recently. But Qatar has won the last two. And this is a tournament that everybody's trying as hard as humanly possible to win in Asia. And Qatar's the team that wins it. But for whatever freaking reason, they can't do anything on the road. Nothing. They're like the worst road team of all time. Look, lost 5-0 at UAE, lost 4-1 at Iran, lost 3-1 at Kyrgyzstan. They haven't won a competitive away match in over a year as of today. They just haven't done it. Their 3 wins, they're all at home. 5-1 against North Korea, 3-2 against Uzbekistan at home. They're an enigma. I don't know. They won the last Asian Cup was played in Qatar. Maybe that's why they won it. They're untouchable in Qatar. But when they have to go on the road, it just falls apart. The weird thing is their match against Iran is at home. So maybe that little home voodoo magic can do it, but it is just bizarre. Whatever your thoughts about Qatar, I watched them play in that Asian Cup, and they were good. They deserved to win that tournament. They were that good. So I have no idea what the hell's going on with them now, why they're behind UAE, Uzbekistan, two teams those teams have never won the Asian Cup. I mean, UAE's never gotten particularly close, at least in my living memory. Right? Kyrgyzstan's only made the Asian Cup one time, and they just lost to them 3-1. It doesn't really pass any logic test, but that's just where Qatar is, and so you really have no idea what to expect from their next 2 matches. Uzbekistan is not out of the woods yet. They have bottled World Cup qualification before, but they could have that euphoric moment if they can get a result at UAE. They won't have to worry about the final match against Qatar. And that is probably the way you want it to go. Even though they'll be at home against Qatar, and Qatar on the road's the worst team in the world, you don't want to mess around with a team that's clearly more talented than what they're putting on the field right now. But Kyrgyzstan's alive, and we love that. And then we go to Europe. I know we didn't really talk about Europe last time, but this one got a little spicy. There are a couple of matches that are important here. Matches that I will call the second place matches, right? Let's say you got a group where Belgium is there, right? Well, Wales and North Macedonia are the 2 next best teams in that group. So the match between them is going to be essentially figuring out who's going to be competing for second. And that is where this match became fantastic, because North Macedonia scored in the 91st. Wales scored in the 96th. 90 minutes of nothing, and then 2 stoppage time goals, 1 apiece. Huge draw for Wales to pull that one out of the fire. Brutal for North Macedonia to let that one slip, because if you can get 3 points there, you're playing to get into second. And second gives you a chance. Not a huge chance, but it gives you a chance. And it's going to be really tough to beat Belgium for both these teams with a draw in a match like this. If one of these teams had managed to get a win and then you can pick up a draw or a surprise win against Belgium, then the door is a little more open. Montenegro managed to survive Faroe Islands. Faroe Islands has given a couple of teams a scare. They hung with the Czech Republic as well, but both of those teams have picked up a pair of wins. The Czech Republic took a while to score, but they ended up putting 4 by Gibraltar, so good for them. Norway and Israel, this was like an exorcism for Norway. This is the sort of match that they always seem to fumble. Israel's national team, at least recently, been on the rise. They've had a few disappointing results, but Erling Haaland scored the 4th goal, 4-1 to Norway until a very late goal from Israel. 4-2 overall, though. This was a second place type game. This is in the same group as Italy, but of course Italy is Italy, so maybe they're just going to go ahead and fumble qualification again. It's a tough loss for Israel because now you're going to have to find out a way to make up ground on Norway somewhere else, whether that's beating Italy, whether that's beating Norway in the second match, but that's going to be on the road. That's going to be tougher. You have to find some place somewhere where you're able to make up that ground. No other real surprises. There was kind of a battle of bad teams going on that got a lot of interest between Moldova and Estonia, mainly because Moldova got a 5th-minute red card. Estonia took a 2-0 lead, then got a red card, then gave up a goal, then scored again 10-on-10, then gave up a second goal. So shout out to these two for making it absolutely wildly entertaining. And technically, this does keep the dream alive for Estonia. While Moldova definitely, with 6 matches to go, not feeling like the dream is alive for them. No, not really. And then South American World Cup qualifying, which is always beautiful. It's always just 5 straight matches in one group. Bolivia picks up the draw, which not the worst result for them against Uruguay, but if you're Bolivia, you got to be winning your home matches or else you're kind of screwed. And that draw was not enough for Bolivia. They actually fell out of 7th because Venezuela got the job done. This was a must-win match for Venezuela. You are not going to get an easier match in World Cup qualifying than at home against Peru in South America. It's just not going to happen. At home against Peru, at home against Chile, at home against Bolivia. Those are matches you've got to win if you want to make your first ever World Cup. That's the match Venezuela won. That's right, Venezuela has never been to the World Cup. They're the only team in South America. Even Bolivia has been once. Venezuela's never been. If you finish 7th, you go to the Intercontinental Playoff, and the team from South America is probably going to be the favorite there because you're going to be playing like, you know, Iraq and New Caledonia and Gabon, right? Like Venezuela would be able to go on a field against those teams, and I feel like do pretty well. If you can finish 7th in South America, you're at least going to have played against world-class teams and be baptized by fire and everything. It looks like Colombia or Paraguay or Brazil are a bit too far for Venezuela to reach. They do have a home match against Bolivia next, so that is a huge 6-pointer for these two teams. And Bolivia on the road, that's why their goal difference is so bad. Them on the road is just like a freaking nightmare. They're terrible on the road. I'm not optimistic about Bolivia being able to handle that. I'd love Bolivia or Venezuela to go to the Intercontinental Playoff or maybe even higher. Those are the two teams that have been downtrodden down here for so long, but I think Venezuela's shown more up to this point. They're going to be able to give us the goods. Chile managed to draw against Ecuador, so they kept their dream alive, although it is going to be hard to reel in Venezuela. What they're hoping for is a draw between Venezuela and Bolivia so that, you know, another win or two can allow Chile to try and backdoor that Intercontinental Playoff spot. But this is a sign of life here. We have not seen a result that looked this good from Chile in a long time. Ecuador's flying. They've had 3 points deducted as part of a penalty, and they're still in 2nd place in qualifying, which is very, like, obviously very, very impressive. And then the other match is Colombia against Paraguay. These are two teams trying to elevate themselves, trying to get to a point where they are comfortable in the World Cup. And this is a super disappointing result for Colombia because the reason they're still in striking distance of a surprise Venezuela run or Bolivia run, I guess, is they didn't win. They blew a 2-0 lead. They were up 2-0 in 13 minutes. John Duran and Luis Diaz scoring for Colombia, a team that, based off those two names alone, these guys have talent, right? But Paraguay came back, down 2-0. Julio Enciso scored the equalizing goal in the 62nd minute, and Paraguay showed why they are one of the 6 teams that's in an automatic, qualifying spot right now. They did not want to concede this position. Paraguay has the same number of points as Uruguay and Brazil right now after 14 matches in World Cup qualifying. Colombia just the 5 points ahead. Their next match is Peru, though. They're also at home against Peru. So I would imagine Colombia is going to be able to pick up 3 points there. Paraguay's sliding in against Uruguay. Brazil's got Ecuador. So Brazil really could tumble down this whole deal a little bit more. And it's time to talk about it because Brazil's bad. Brazil might be as bad or worse than it ever has been. They suffered an incredible humiliation at Argentina, the Super Classico, 4-1. There's really not much else to say. I mean, it was 2-0 in 12 minutes. Argentina were at their shit-talking best. They were rabble-rousing. But I think what's amazing is the rivalry between Brazil and Argentina was always a great one. But Brazil has almost always been the more talented team overall, right? That was always my understanding of the rivalry growing up, is that, like, Brazil had the deeper national pool. They had more great players. Argentina had the puncher's chance, but it was Brazil that against basically anybody is the favorite just based off the talent that they have. And I just don't think that's the case. Now, Argentina feels way better. And they managed to qualify for the World Cup with this win. So congratulations to them. Obviously, a lot of showboating going on in that game. But hey, if you're beating your hated rival this comfortably, enjoy it. Argentina is guaranteed to go along with Japan, along with Iran, and along with New Zealand. Those are the 4 teams that have guaranteed their qualification to the World Cup, as New Zealand managed to beat New Caledonia in the Oceania World Cup playoff final. That sends New Caledonia to the continental playoffs. So they're the first team guaranteed to be there. They still have a chance to get one of the last 2 spots to go to the World Cup through the playoff. And let's be honest, we have no idea what to expect out of New Caledonia there. It'll be fun to see them on that kind of stage, and maybe they can make some magic happen. But Chris Wood and New Zealand are going back to the World Cup for the first time since 2010, thanks to that win. And Chris Wood got hurt in that match. Nobody scored for the first hour. That was a spicy little match down in Oceania. But Brazil, still not safe. Only team safe in South America right now, Argentina. And Venezuela has moved into that coveted 7th spot before we hit the matches in the summer. And World Cup qualifying goes on hiatus until June. RIP in peace.